Denver and Minnesota. Classic game between those two. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Pelicans making their move in the West. And is Paul George on his way out of Los Angeles? It's all right now on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On NBA podcast. I am so happy to be back on this show. Not that anybody who's watching or listening missed me, but I missed doing it with my good friend Jake Madison. Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed to wherever you get your podcast. Watch the show on YouTube. Hop into that comment section. Let us know what you're thinking about everything. I want to say as usual on Wednesdays, but it's just not been as usual. But what's supposed to be as usual on Wednesdays. It's me, John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. Find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
Y'all know me. I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast, on Twitter at Nola Jake. We get to use the music today for real or fake and everything since it has our names in it.
It's just so, I feel like I've been away from, like I've gone away to college and I'm coming back home to the family. That's what it feels like. How's it going, man? How have you been? Feels like we need to reintroduce ourselves.
Yeah, I know. Watch the show be just, look, we're going to talk about the Pelicans and like team chemistry and things like that, right? It's important here. We're going to see if we still got it after like an injury layoff or something like that.
It's like riding a bike. We always know how to play with each other. Real or fake with Paul George is later on. I'm going to let Jake Madison talk for 10 minutes straight in the second segment about Zion Williamson and the Pelicans. But let's start, Jake, with Denver Nuggets, Minnesota Timberwolves, 115-112. It looked like the Nuggets were running away with it. The Timberwolves shorthanded, but they came back. Monster third quarter, back and forth fourth quarter. Anthony Edwards had an amazing look at the end of the game to potentially tie it, but a classic game. I'm like, I want to wipe the sweat off of my brow after that game. That game lived up to the hype at the top of the standings. It's a great one. What's your biggest takeaway here from Nuggets, Minnesota Timberwolves?
There's two, right? Like the first is just Nikola Jokic is an alien that was like put on this planet to just play basketball and win games, right? Like he came from the future and time traveled backwards, knowing what he needed to do to be the best player in the league. And he showed in this when he just decided to take over the fourth quarter. There's basically nothing anyone can do. And when he gets into that kind of groove and going like that, like there's a reason no one wants to play them in the playoffs, right? Like they're not the number one seed, they're in contention for all of that here, but everyone is like, don't want to play Denver in any sort of fashion if you can avoid it. There's a reason for that. It's Nikola Jokic. He proves it again against a really tough out in the Timberwolves, right? Like this is a team that just kind of refuses to go away. That Karl Anthony Towns injury seems like it could have tanked them. Their offense has struggled at times this year, but Anthony Edwards has absolutely stepped up. He's kind of been just the breakout star of the league, it seems like this year. It just feels like he's carrying that team right now, and he's capable of doing that. And that's the reason why you're not going to write off this team in the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? They didn't have Rudy Gobert in this one. They didn't have Karl Anthony Towns in this one. That's a recipe for an easy loss against the really good Denver Nuggets. And Anthony Edwards is Anthony Edwards and takes you pretty far. Like this is as good of a moral loss, right? Moral victory as you could probably get.
Yeah, look, Minnesota falls a game behind Denver. Denver percentage points tied for first, but percentage points behind the Oklahoma City Thunder there. I like the way you characterized it because I still think Minnesota, as great as their season has been, and I don't want to disrespect what they've done, I still feel like they're at tough out status because it's still a young team. It's still a team that hasn't been battle tested yet. And the same, I'm going to say the same thing about the Thunder, who are 47-20, winning 70% of your games in an NBA season is amazing. But I've seen magical runs like this end come playoff time. So both of those teams are very much in prove-it mode to me. The Nuggets have proven it. And that's why I look at a game like this. I don't want to overreact to individual games in the regular season to say, oh, this means this for the playoffs. But you have Michael Porter Jr. stepping up and having a big night. You have, like, we all expect Jokic to have a monster night, but 2 assists is the big number there. 35 points, 16 rebounds. A weird night, right? When Jokic has just 2 assists, that's what everybody says. Make him a shooter, make him a scorer, take away his passing. They took away his passing, but you know what? Jamal Murray had 11 assists. And so they have other guys that can make up for it. If you flip the numbers and say Jamal Murray took some of the scoring load, but some of those assists go to Jokic, if you combine the numbers, maybe that's a better way to put it, between Jokic and Murray, you probably get what a typical production night would be for those two. But this is, if anything in this game that I think translates into the playoffs, it's Jokic is a god. As I tweeted out the Groundhog Day clip, I'm a god. I'm not the god, I don't think. That's Jokic. He's a god when it comes to basketball. This guy's out there dropping 35 points like it's nothing. Clutch shots. You got a guy like Michael Porter Jr. who can step up. You have Aaron Gordon doing what he normally does. You've got Murray stepping up, and you didn't get much from the bench, but you got enough from everybody to get this job done. I just trust Denver in a lot of these situations. And now I'm a guy that covers the Celtics. If no one would be surprised if it's Celtics Denver in the finals. But a game like this, a finish like this, is why you trust Denver to get to the finals.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like they've proven it. You said it. You trust them. Like, I trust Jokic. It's really that simple. Him, them winning the finals and him being as good as he was in that series too, I think takes a little bit of pressure off them with some of this, right? It's why he's going to win an MVP award again, probably, it seems like, at this point in time, right? Like, he had to have the playoff success before people were going to keep giving him those. And I even said it on the show, like, once he wins the finals, cool, you can let him get as many MVP awards as you want and no one will be upset anymore. We're not debating this. We're not you're not having people scream about it. They've proven it. They've been there. The Timberwolves haven't. Anthony Edwards, I think, can win you a playoff series, in the first round, depending on the matchup. Like, absolutely, yep. I think he can take you pretty far. But if they don't have Karl Anthony Towns there to provide a little bit more offense, like, that's going to end up hurting them. But they're still an elite defensive team. But the problem is Rudy Gobert has been schemed out in the playoffs before too. So because of that, there's still like kind of big question marks around him where you just don't think like, oh yeah, that team can totally do it. As much as I'm like a huge Anthony Edwards fan, his dunk the other night was easily the dunk of the year. And it's like one of the most fun players to watch in the league. So
yeah,
it's gonna be like, yeah, he's 22. They got plenty of time, but it's gonna be kind of sad when they lose in the second round of the playoffs.
It is. Like, look, so when I say he's 22, it means two things. First of all, I think it means that he's got a long career of making playoff runs because he's that good. He is going to be good enough to take the Timberwolves on multiple playoff runs himself.
Yes.
But also he's 22 and the playoffs are such a different animal. It depends on who the Timberwolves, can they be whole? That's going to be a serious question. Like you said, the Gobert question in the playoffs is always just going to be lingering there. We'll see if it's different with this team because of how they're constructed. It's a different dynamic with Edwards playing the way he's been playing, and just different options. You can go small. One thing you can take away from this from a Minnesota perspective is with no Cat, with no Gobert, you can go small and be effective. And that's something that you can kind of carry with you. I don't know if it translates necessarily, but it translates as far as confidence, and confidence can carry you a little bit here in the playoffs. So it gives Minnesota the confidence to say, hey, we can go small and have a different way to play. And when you're heading into the playoffs, a different way to play is a good thing to have. With Gobert, if you even need to sit him for a stretch and be like, you know what, you're not effective right now. We're going to go with this McDaniels, Kyle Anderson front court. You can do that and you can trust it.
Yeah, they also have Naz Reid, who didn't play in this game either, and he's like a very good kind of like change of pace big for what they like to use, where he can shoot threes, can space the court a little bit more too, gives you a lot of like energy and springiness off the bench. So like they have things that they can do. I'm just not going to trust them until they do it. It's just kind of that, right? Like,
but look, Anthony Edwards is amazing, and he deserves. I can't believe he missed that shot. Like, that's the biggest compliment I can pay a guy in that situation is you get that last second shot, a clean look like that in that situation. I'm shocked that he missed it. That's a compliment. But hey, shout out to the Denver Nuggets, man. They keep finding ways to win. And when they lose, it's been like weird, like Kyrie Irving 20-foot left-handed thing. Like they lose in like a way that you're like, that kind of happens. So Nuggets are pretty good. The Pelicans are pretty good. Your team, you get to watch some really good basketball and maybe the best Zion Williamson we've seen ever in the NBA. Let's talk about that when we come back. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. You know that we've got that Locked On 24/7 sports streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today, March 20th at 7 p.m. Go check it out. The best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. March 20th at 7 p.m. on Locked On Sports Today. Local insight from MLB local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Locked On Sports Today, on the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Jake, I don't know if you've noticed, but the New Orleans Pelicans are playing quite well lately.
Wow. How about that?
Yeah. I mean, I know you don't pay attention, but they've won 8 of their last 10. They're 16-6?
They're 16-5 in their last 21 games.
16-5 in their last 21 games. Jake Madison, what makes the Pelicans so good?
So there's a couple of things. They are peaking at the right time, and I think this is what you want to see from a team. You know, they're a defensive team first and foremost, and head coach Willie Green kind of has everyone bought in on that side of the ball here. They're one of, I think, 4 teams, including your Celtics, that are top 10 in both offense and defensive rating here. Since January 1, I think they've had the best defense in the league. I think they have the 3rd or 4th best net rating during that time, which is like kind of one of those stats that you look at to see if a team could make the conference finals. If that's like above 5 or 6 of a net rating, that's a team that usually is a conference finals team. Almost all of them are a minimum 5 on net rating when you look at that. So on the defensive side of the ball, they're great at just forcing turnovers when they can get out and run with some of the guys they have in Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum. Trey Murphy's a great shooter. Herb Jones has been an absolute menace in transition this year. Yeah. They're really good. And then when you score, your defense gets back, gets set because the opponent's inbounding the ball, and then you force another turnover, and you just kind of keep repeating the cycle. And so their defense is really kind of leading them. And then Zion Williamson became a professional NBA player is one of the ways that I have described this, right? There was just a report on ESPN that he's lost 25 pounds during the season to just be in maybe the best shape of his career. And when you look at him, just pictures of him now versus earlier in the year, he looks different. And he is just I don't know. Something is different about him. There's more athleticism there. He looks more bought in both offensively and defensively, and he's just making plays. And one of the things New Orleans is doing right now is they're just running point Zion. They did not do that at the beginning of the year. I think they wanted their offense to be something that if Zion missed time, because look, that's what's happened every year of his career. You know, if your offense is point Zion and he's not playing, you don't have an offense here. So they went away from that for a little bit, but he's been healthy this year, right? He's on pace to play more than 65 games this year and qualify for all the awards and everything. He has not even missed consecutive games this season. So they've started to go back to the point Zion offense where he's just an advantage creator, right? This is a guy that draws double, triple, quadruple teams at times. Put the ball in his hands and let him spray the ball out or drive to the rim and score. And it's really that simple. And when you put shooters like CJ, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, who's been one of the top 3-point shooters this season for the, in the league, good things happen, and they're just peaking at the right time. I'd said it earlier in the year. You look at a team like the Sacramento Kings. It's a good team, but do they have another level to reach, or they just are who they are? And to me, that's kind of what the Kings have been. I looked at the Pelicans early on in the year where the offense was basically just awful. They were in the bottom 10 of the league with that. And it's like, oh, if they actually figure it out because they're not actually playing their best basketball, this team could be pretty good. And it's nice when you start playing your best basketball with 15 games left to go in the season, heading into the postseason. They're a half game behind the Clippers right now. They're putting pressure on them for the 4th seed and potentially home court. Zion looks basically unstoppable. Brandon Ingram is still Brandon Ingram. They're great defensively. Herb Jones has improved. I don't know. It's just leading to them being a really good team. And one of the things they do is just crush bad teams. And that's been fun. Did you see the Zion lob in this game?
I didn't see that one. No,
you should. Let's do this in the moment here. Like look that up because it is silly. Like this goes to him just, I'll spin the wheels here and talk as you look this up. He looks a little bit like Duke Zion. You're seeing him make plays on the defensive side of the ball of making kind of some absurd blocks that he did in college. You're seeing him kind of just have the ups that he hasn't had before on some of these alley-oop plays. This was a horrible lob attempt, and watch him just kind of flush this thing down. And it's pretty ridiculous what we're seeing from him. You mentioned it earlier that he might be playing the best basketball of his career. In one sense, yes. In one, see, look at that.
Oh,
look at that.
Whoa.
He looks like he's like a moon, like a crescent moon arcing back to dunk that thing.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to give my best. Yeah, because I did miss this when it happened. Okay, so the lob is thrown kind of behind him, right? So
yeah,
he plants 2 feet between the bottom of the dots and the restricted area. Oh man, he goes back and reaches back like you cock it back, and wow, that's a hell of a wow. Okay, yep. I'm glad you filled time until I saw that.
The ball is almost at the bottom of the dots, right, from the free throw line.
Yeah.
That's kind of like where he almost grabs the ball and flushes it down. It's pretty insane. Like seeing him do that, you're like, oh, like Zion it's clicked with him. He said he was stacking extra days of cardio to get the conditioning up, to get in better shape. It's why he's acting like a professional basketball player now. He's playing games, they're winning, he's having fun, he's active on the defensive side of the ball. Like, that's a scary dude.
That is a scary dude. And like, I'm glad that we're getting to see the promise of Zion finally. And look, sometimes when you're that talented, you've gotten away with everything. I do believe that there's some level of people are always going to kind of drop to whatever line you're allowed to drop to where what you do is acceptable, right? Like whatever amount of effort it takes to do your job, where people are like, yeah, he's doing a good job. Like that. Could you do your job better? Yeah. But I think a lot of people just kind of go to, okay, this is the line where people will see what I do and they go, yep, good job. No problems. We're moving on. Not going to pay attention to him because we can trust this person. And Zion for a long time has just done that and been amazing. But getting to the NBA has required a different level of just focus, discipline, all of that stuff. And it's taken a little while for him to realize, like, man, it doesn't matter what talent I have. I'm just not at this level of everybody else because I keep getting hurt. I can't be on. It's everything I'm doing is hurting me. And like this season, we've done shows to start the season about his kind of like realizations. Like I'm glad that it's coming together. And a person who's probably naturally kind of predisposed to, hey, if I eat this shrimp etouffee, I'm going to gain like 2 extra pounds as compared to somebody else. Like, you got to realize that. I say it as a person who loves to indulge.
Yeah, you're gonna be doing that in a week, by the way.
I'm going to be there in a week, and it's going to be all of the progress that I've made since Jan 1 is going to be down the tubes. But Zion Williamson can't do what I'm about to do to myself because it's going to hurt him. So it's good to see that he's progressing in that manner.
Yeah, I'll say kind of last thing here, with the team is they're a good team. I worry about them a little bit in the playoffs, as we kind of talked about in the last segment, right? Like untested. Zion's never been there. Brandon Ingram's only experience is a 6-game series 2 years ago against the Phoenix Suns. There's a lot there where you're like, will they, is the stage too big? It's a different animal for all of that. Their starters have also not been great. I don't know exactly why the 5-man unit of CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Jonas Valanciunas has not been good. Their bench has won them a lot of these games. When you're kind of running a shorter rotation in the playoffs, a deeper bench isn't necessarily the advantage it was during the regular season. So the starters still need to kind of figure some things out. They have actually improved over the past couple of weeks, so they're trending in the right direction. That's, I think, the biggest thing that might hold them back. If the starters can't win their minutes, you're likely not going to win a playoff series, something that's worth keeping an eye on.
You could be facing the Clippers. Let's talk
almost
about
certainly facing the Clippers.
Actually, when you look at the standings,
like they're facing the Clippers, it seems like
it's probably going to be the Clippers unless something happens and the Kings make a run or the Mavs make a run and the Mavs won tonight. But yes, Clippers, Pelicans. Is this the last go around with this Clippers team? We'll indulge that question when we play Real or Fake next. Today's show is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further, like Jake Madison? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level, like the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive, Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Forget about connecting your phone with a cord. It always gets tangled up and you're pulling your... I just rip my phone out of the car all the time. Google Assistant with Google Maps, Google Play Store is all built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. The 2024 Nissan Armada will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8, all in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Hey, make sure you are checking out the Locked On NBA podcasts across the team. Houston beats Washington, Locked On Rockets, Locked On Wizards. Orlando beats Charlotte, Locked On Magic, Locked On Hornets. Pelicans, Jake Madison, obviously. Over the Locked On Nets, Dallas beats San Antonio, Locked On Mavs, and Locked On Spurs. 2 great shows. And obviously Locked On Nuggets, Locked On Timberwolves, all covering the league as a whole. So make sure you're checking them all out after a big night in the NBA. Jake, the Clippers are searching for an identity. They have struggled a little bit recently, losing to the Hawks, very undermanned Hawks team. looking like a classic team, thinking that they can turn it on whenever they feel like. And it's not going as well as they probably would like.
Has that ever worked for the Clippers ever in this era?
No, nope. It's I think the biggest problem for the Clippers, and it may become an even bigger problem for the Clippers if Paul George does not re-sign. John Hollinger on The Athletic says, keep an eye on Paul George. Presumably, if there was a max extension sitting around for him, he would have signed it by now. I think it's fair to say a couple of cap room teams in the East are monitoring this. So, Jake, Madison, it's time to play our favorite game.
Is this real or fake? Just ask John and Jake.
Oh, I'm so glad we get to play that music. Real or fake, Jake? This is the final season in a Clippers uniform for Paul George.
It's fake. It's fake. He's going to be back. I think they're going to run everything back. I don't necessarily think they should, but they're building a $2 billion arena, the Intuit Dome. You run this back with named players that will at least win games in the regular season so that you can pack that, sell it out. If the move you have happened before you move into that arena is lose Paul George, a guy from Los Angeles, hometown guy that wanted to be there, that's a disaster. Now, he has agency in this, right? Like, he's a free agent. He doesn't have to re-sign with them. So if he ends up leaving, it's his choice, not the Clippers deciding not to do it. But there is no way that Steve Ballmer, with that kind of money, he wants to just pack that arena, win a bunch of games, maybe bring in a new head coach eventually, and see if they can make another run with this group.
It's boring to say that I also think it's fake, but let me throw this out at you. The Clippers in the Western Conference going up against an OKC Thunder team on the come up, Minnesota Timberwolves on the come up, Denver Nuggets, always going to be great considering, as long as Jokic sticks around, and they are a very good team beyond that. Pelicans on the come up. That's 4 other teams, and the Clippers are sitting there. We just talked about they are an aging team. They are always going to be, from now until whenever this team does eventually break up, they're going to be a team that kind of has to muddle through the regular season. But when you muddle through the regular season in the West, Dallas, we didn't mention them. Phoenix, who knows what they're going to be. Sacramento is always just hanging around. You're hanging around the bottom of the playoff kind of scenario, the picture. And you risk, if you don't, they're only 3 games out of the play-in, right? So a play-in possibility, that's the last thing they want. Philadelphia has the cap space. The Celtics are obviously the class of the East right now, but they're super expensive, and they might have another year or 2 at best with this team before they financially have to break it up. Milwaukee is expensive. They're going to have to break it up at some point. Philly, with cap space, is starting. Tyrese Maxey is young. What about the possibility that Paul George goes, between me, Embiid, who knows what the Embiid situation is going to be injury-wise, but between me, Embiid, Maxey, that's a hell of a big 3. And the East is going to go through some turmoil in the next year or 2 at the top. This could be an opportunity. My best chance, Paul George says, to get a championship or get to the championship, the finals, is through the East. And as much as the Clippers are throwing max money at me, maybe the reason that he hasn't signed is because he's looking at the Eastern Conference and going, if I go back East, I got an easier road.
Look, I think that's a possibility, right? Like, I think that's very much a realistic possibility. I'm sure Ballmer will try and find other ways to make it up to Paul George to keep him there, even if the money's the same in some capacity.
Are you saying he might circumvent cap rules?
He's going to get his own private helicopter or something like that to take him wherever. Does Kawhi take a helicopter from San Diego or something like that?
Jake, you're talking about illegal things that are
shocking.
not supposed to happen.
Okay.
This is me finger wagging.
Yeah. Look, but you're right. It's going to be an easier road to the finals. Like, look, the Celtics have somewhat of an expiration date on the current team that they have right now, just because of the second April and things like that. So if you see an easier path, that might be the move. But these guys also have other motivations of, he wanted to be in LA. And I think that desire is really, really strong for him too. That does open up like interesting questions though. Say he bolts and goes to the Philadelphia 76ers. James Harden has a player option for $35 million, or is it a team option? Like, what does that then lead for the future with him, right? Like, that's one that kind of opens the door of, well, do you pay him to retain him? Does that mean you actually have to give him more money? Would you rather work on it's a player option for 35? No, that was this year. He's a free agent too, actually. So like, does that mean you just let James Harden walk because he's going to want big time money again? But if Paul George leaves, do you have to throw $30 million at James Harden on like a 2-year deal again? That seems like a disaster. The Clippers are going to be like any of these other teams. You're going to have to just deal with this eventually. You can keep kicking the can down the road as far as you want, but eventually you're going to need to bottom out. I just think they're going to look to avoid doing that the first year in their new arena. Where you need to show like a fan card to sit in a certain section or something like that.
I know. I want to see that new arena. It's supposedly going to be something unlike any other arena. The most hilarious outcome would be Paul George decides to go to Philadelphia. It doesn't work out, and Philadelphia continues to fall on their face and doesn't get out of the second round. Meanwhile, Tobias Harris, Philadelphia punching bag, and for good reason this year, he's really struggling. But Tobias Harris goes back to LA on a minimum deal. For some reason, rejuvenates himself, steps up, finds a new way, and the Clippers actually get to the NBA Finals while Paul George and Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey fall on their faces in the second round of the playoffs. That, to me, I'm coming at it from a Boston perspective, would be hilarious. So, but I do believe it's
give us all the humor. Give us all the humor in the NBA. I love it.
I'm all for it. But I do believe it's fake for all of the reasons that you said. There's no way Steve Ballmer is going to allow this to happen. You cannot, heading into day one of this new arena, you cannot allow for a storyline other than this team is reloading to make a run. You got to find a way to make that the story. So, all right. Well, the story of this podcast is we've done it. It's over. And I'm so happy to have done it with you. I am John Karalis, the actual normal regular person who's supposed to be here every Wednesday and finally gets to do this show because the Celtics were off on a Tuesday night. Follow me on Twitter. Listen to me on the Locked On Celtics podcast. Find me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
You'll actually be here next week too. I just looked at the schedule, which is awesome. So there we go. I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast on Twitter at Nola Jake.
And we might actually do some in-person podcasting in New Orleans because I will be there when the Celtics visit the Pelicans. I never miss a trip to New Orleans. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't subscribed at this point, make sure that you are watching the show on YouTube, hop into the comment section. And I would love it if you share the podcast, spread the word, tell everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On NBA podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your